All right, welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast. Today is podcast number 6. This has been going really well. I've been enjoying all the feedback that everybody's been sending in. It's really fun. Like, you know, I hoped that it would be the type of thing where people were getting more engaged, and each week the comments coming in are more. We have the most comments and questions this week of any week, so keep them coming, guys. I like doing this, and so we're always happy to answer any of your questions, especially if there's confusion about the course or anything that's unclear. We always want to, pick that stuff up and, therefore make the course better. It's kind of a living course now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just a few updates on what we've been doing this week. Each week we'll give you a little update on what we've been up to. And we've been focusing on making some updates to the pronunciation mastery, just for the purpose of getting it on a couple of more platforms, but also to get you guys ready for an announcement. We're not quite ready to make the announcement yet, but we're going to have an announcement about pronunciation mastery that I'm sure that you'll all be very excited about. So that's one thing we've been doing. And another thing that we've been doing that I would like to talk about is we've been reaching out to potential partners, people who might want to come on the podcast, do a guest post on our blog, or be open to us doing a guest post on their blog. And so if you know anyone, or you yourself would like to join the podcast, send us an email over at support@mandarinblueprint.com. We're always looking for new ways to promote the course and also just get people using this method, because it really works. So
yeah.
All right. So any other updates you want to talk about, Luke?
Well, I mean, we just had Chinese New Year, haven't we? And
yours was much more interesting than mine. So
yeah, I mean, where to start? So first of all, I took an opportunity to finally propose to my girlfriend, who's now fiance. So that's great. We did it in Beijing.
Congratulations.
Yeah, did it in Beijing with at the top of Jingshan, overlooking the Summer Palace and Forbidden City. And
well, it wouldn't be the Summer Palace. Summer Palace is up in the north.
What is
it?
Yeah,
Forbidden City.
Forbidden City, that's the one. Yeah, it was all dark anyway. All the lights were turned off.
Oh,
I hoped all the lights would be on. That's the whole point of why I went up there. Yeah. Anyway, she said yes, that's good. And also she was telling everyone, oh look, Mao Zedong, like Mao Zedong also agreed on the
right,
the marriage as well. So,
well, that's good. Then you're for sure going to have I don't know what to make of that, but
let's not go into Mao. This is best not. But yeah, so that was great, and I had a really unique experience. I mean, I was in her hometown, I was in the countryside, and there's just so much to talk about it. But
yeah, so so you were in the countryside in the Hebei province, right? Is that
in the Hebei province, which it was, started off in Chengdu. It's a little place called Huangzhuang. Like Huanghou, Huang, like royalty, sort of Huangzhuang. Little village, very, very small amount, relatively small amount of people. And I just basically got to experience the real Chinese New Year for the first time. I've been in China for like almost 6 years. And my experience of Chinese New Year, our experience of Chinese New Year has been pretty, benign. It's just been like, we've had a few drinks, and yes, we heard some fireworks go off before they were banned in all cities across China because of pollution, unfortunately. But we never really had that much, a unique experience of it. I certainly hadn't until now. And we also, you hear about Chinese New Year as like this, you hear about it from Chinese textbooks, or any Chinese course that you try and, they all say, let me tell you about what we do at Chinese New Year. We eat dumplings and we do this, and it just feels so lame. It's just like, again, talk about Chinese New Year. But to actually experience it is something else, especially experiencing it in the countryside the way it's supposed to be experienced.
Yeah.
You can't experience it properly in the city, at least that's what I've been told. Partly to do with some of the ceremonies that take place, and of course fireworks aren't allowed anymore, so it's kind of like Christmas without Christmas decorations or Christmas trees. Or
just a quick note in the fireworks, when I first came here, I was in Beijing for Chinese New Year, and it was like, I'm sure that auditorily speaking, it was what it must feel like to be in a war zone. Because like you'd be walking around and suddenly it'd be like, and then
and people would aim at you as well. So I just like shooting those little things, having like little fights. Like those, I can't remember what they're called, but those fireworks that sort of shoot off.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, they don't do that anymore and that was the reason they gave the government was because of pollution.
I mean, it did get pretty crazy. Like it was like the day of Spring Festival, you would just look around and, you know, sometimes Beijing would be badly polluted anyway. So it wasn't like you weren't used to the sensation, but you would look out and be like, whoa, that's pretty gross.
Yeah. But it's a lot of fun, and it is like Christmas. That it's the Chinese equivalent of Christmas.
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, we got there we got to Chengdu, the Huangzhuang, the little village, at 3 p.m. or so. I have to look at my notes for this because there's so much to talk about. So I'm just going to dive right into it. So like 3 p.m. This is essentially Christmas Eve.
Right.
The equivalent of Christmas Eve, and there was already just hundreds of dumplings there ready to eat. So me and my fiance, we started pretty much eating immediately as soon as we got there. And it was essentially, it was what you're supposed to do on Christmas Eve. You're supposed to put up the chunlian, like the red things you see around the doors, and it's to keep away the nian shou, the sort of nian monster, the year monster, which is supposed to come around and eat children. Apparently,
right.
So that's why they put up those red things around the doors, you know.
Yeah, there's lots of little superstitions around it, but they're kind of just charming, you know. It's just sort of things like that.
It's just like Santa Claus, you know, or Father Christmas, like coming and like watching you throughout the year, and you know, comes in the night and delivers you presents. It's like those kind of sort of interesting stories.
And by the way, the day before Chunjie, which is the actual day of Spring Festival, Chinese New Year, is called Chuxi. And that's the night before. And I admittedly before was confused about which night was the night of the big dinner, and it's Chuxi, right?
Chuxi, you mean like first time, right? Is it Chu?
Oh,
right, okay.
Chuxi.
Oh, of course it is. Sorry, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so it's just like the night before and it's because you have dinner and then you stay up till midnight and anyway.
Yeah. So like they were just preparing more and more dumplings whilst I was just chatting away to her dad. And then we had for dinner, we basically had this nian ye fan, like the basically Christmas Eve meal. And apparently they have to have fish because it's nian nian you yu. Nian nian you yu.
Yeah. We had fish as well,
Yeah. So after I chatted away to her dad for a while, they were preparing jiaozi the whole time for that night and also the next day, and also to deliver to the gods, which I'll talk about in a sec. So that evening we had fish. Fish is very important to have on that Christmas Eve meal, the nian ye fan, the basically Christmas Eve, or Chinese New Year Eve.
Yeah. No, I think the comparison to Christmas Eve is good.
I've got to keep using that comparison because it felt like it, like the magic of Christmas as well. I felt a little taste of that. It's like the magic of Chinese New Year. So you have to have fish because it's like Chinese. The Chinese love essentially puns, you know, 双关语 or it's called something else. I can't remember. The character is the same tone, but it's a different character, or the same pronunciation as well. So it's 年年有余. So yu is also fish, but in this case, yu means surplus. So basically, if you have the fish in the New Year's Eve, you know, the Christmas Eve, that means the whole year is going to be, you know, you're going to have lots of stuff, lots of food and things like that.
Right.
And this is a very common theme as well. It's whatever you do on New Year or New Year's Eve or around New Year is sort of follows on through the rest of the year. So you eat a lot of jiaozi the next morning, for example. So we had I won't jump ahead though. So we had a huge meal. But before we had the meal, we had a ceremony where everyone has to 磕头, like bow down to it's Buddhism, right? Buddhism is heavily it's probably the most popular religion by far in China.
Yeah. I mean, most people would consider themselves non-religious if they were surveyed, but of the religions, Buddhism has the most people, I think. Yeah,
but this is an incredibly common ceremony. And they have a special room, like her mum will go in and deliver some jiaozi. First give vegetarian jiaozi, you're not allowed to give meat because it's, you know, vegetarian Buddhism, right? So she'll go and sort of offer up to some the Buddha, I guess, and you know, say like they have like XIŌNG, they'll have incense as well. And after the Buddha gets to eat, then we get to eat, right? So then we all sit down, have this huge meal. So called 先祭祖, 先祭祖, which is first give to the Buddha. And then we set off fireworks, and then we finally get to eat loads of dumplings. Now, dumplings are the theme, basically, for most of it. They're like the 主食, the main, sort of like the main meal, I guess you could say, but it's not quite the same sort of definition. But lots of drinking, stayed up till like, midnight or so, just being force-fed baijiu and dumplings, which is just lovely. I actually really like baijiu now, by the way.
Yeah, it grew on me as well. It took a while, but yeah.
Yeah. And here's a really interesting point. So my fiance has 2 older sisters. And because they're both married, they're not allowed to spend the New Year's Eve with their parents, because they're girls. They have to spend it with their husbands.
Oh, right.
So away from their parents. So we're not married. But so we can spend, but I'm not Chinese anyway, so it actually doesn't matter. It's only if I was a Chinese man and we were married, then my wife would not be allowed, under Chinese tradition, to spend the New Year with her parents. So that means that her parents would be all alone in a big house. You should
probably just call up your folks and just be like, hey, start a new tradition entirely. We're coming to England every year because that's what Chinese tradition demands.
Yeah, exactly. So it was. So what they did though, they first cooked all the food for us, the 2 older sisters, before we even got there. They made loads of dumplings and all the fish and stuff. They made it and then went off.
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
To spend the evening with their husbands and their families. So it was basically us 4 and another family from down the road. So that was very interesting. It's like they would call it 重男轻女 sort of thing.
Oh yeah, okay, sure.
Which is why people want that is, in the countryside,
the
especially.
Chinese word for misogyny, by the way.
Basically, but that's what
literally like 重男, so that means like 重 means heavy by itself, but it also means like important.
Weight.
Right? There's weight to it, and then 轻 means light or not important. So
and this is the words of my fiance. A lot of us would just consider that okay, that's just the culture, but what have you. But so. I'm glad that we got to spend the evening with them. They weren't, eating alone, because that's what would have happened otherwise. So after dinner, we went and set off more fireworks. Again, this is like the important fireworks ceremony to sort of scare away the ghost or the monster of the new year. So that's what the fireworks are essentially there for. And we keep the lights on all night, which is very unusual for my fiance's parents, because they like to save electricity. They're in the village, but they have to keep the lights on and the heaters and whatever all night. Again, keep that monster away.
Oh, right. Yeah, like there was
so it's quite a bit darker than Father Christmas, right? But
but there's sort of
otherwise we're going to get eaten alive, So
although there is sort of like a we're in this together type of feeling. So when I did a much less traditional Chinese New Year this time around, but the one thing that we did do was I went to our mutual friend James's house, and his wife's mom cooked the dinner. But one of the things that we did follow was before midnight, nobody was allowed to open the door. Like, it was like the key, got to keep the door closed until after midnight. So James's nephew wanted to leave around 10:30, and the mom was like, "No,
standing in front of the door.
You can't leave. Yeah, you got to wait till midnight." Anyway.
Oh man, well that's that's the culture. 入乡随俗, right? So we got woke up at 5 a.m. by fireworks again. It's a very common theme. You're supposed to get up early and, again, go and go and bow down. But this time it was outside. I'm not sure if that is a common thing, but it was, the original one the night before was inside, and this is outside. And they started, burning money. So Nana's, my fiance's father held the ceremony. I bowed down and we burnt some sort of paper money. And then we went and ate more dumplings. And I don't eat breakfast. I have 2 meals a day usually. At least that's what I'm used to for the last 6 months or so. And so it was really hard for me at 5 a.m. to force down a load of dumplings.
Are they not like going to be fine with you just being like, oh no, thank you?
No, and I wouldn't. I wouldn't dream of doing that. So, and they're lovely, they're delicious, but it's just like, oh, I'm not used to this. So, but one of the key things they do, because obviously, again, it's very Christmas-like, because a lot of the ceremonies or the customs related to it are for children, right? So kids don't like getting up at 5 a.m. and being, force-fed dumplings. So what they do is in one dumpling, they'll put a little yingbi, they'll put a little coin. And in another dumpling, they'll put some tofu. Okay. So if you bite down on the yingbi, that means you're going to be, I think you either get some cash. I can't remember this bit. You either get some cash straight away from your parents, like sort of like Tooth Fairy or whatever.
Oh, okay.
Or I think it just means you're going to be very wealthy for the next year. I can't remember. But if you eat the tofu one, that means doufu is Chinese for tofu, doufu. Mm-hmm. And again, here's another one of those sort of, I guess you could say puns or whatever. Doufu, so everyone's going to be fu, which means rich.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Or well, have a lot of stuff, be very.
So it's kind of like you'll be rich or everyone will be rich.
Yeah. So, but no one got. I got the tofu one. So hey, everyone's a winner. But I think the yingbi one got given to the gods outside because no one got the coin, and it was so cute. Like my fiance's dad's so sweet. He was just like, pretending he got the coin. Like, not really. That was like his little joke. It was just adorable. But yeah, so that was that. And again, that's for kids, to encourage them to eat a lot. It's just a lot because the more you eat, again, if you eat a lot in New Year, it carries on for the rest of the year. You're going to you're going to have abundance for the rest of the year.
Right.
Now here came the really interesting bit, which I didn't expect at all. By the way, my fiance didn't warn me about any of this stuff. Or warn. I mean, it was not like bad or anything, but she didn't prepare me, let's say, for all this stuff. So for the next 5 or 6 hours, what happened was a 拜年. So basically means that because it's a village, very close knit. Everyone knows everyone. For the next 6 hours, we had people coming from all around the village to come and 拜年 to Nana's parents, especially her father. They're very respected in the community, very well liked. So loads of people want to say, and obviously they're older, right? So younger people go to older people's houses. Mm-hmm. And because they're older, they only had 2 people that they knew that were older than them. So they had to go. So Nana's, my fiance's parents had to go to the other houses with the older people to 拜年 to them, and took us with them and showed off the new sort of family and whatnot.
Engaged to be wed, yeah. Sure.
Yes, exactly. So that was really interesting, really cool. But again, doing that for 5 hours was, and you said like, 过年好, 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 新年快乐. So yeah, and then we just had lunch and just drank. And I mean, that's pretty much the gist of it. I've missed probably loads of details, but it was just
forgotten them likely.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I was drunk most of the time. It was just, having like.
And it's because like you want to be respectful to your fiance's family, and they keep offering. Like I've been in that situation many times.
What you'll see a lot is, especially I guess, if there's like a Westerner that's coming in. But I think it's normal for whether you're Western or not. But the older people, like the uncles and the whatever, they'll sort of kind of force you to drink and sort of see how much you can handle and stuff like this. And they kind of did that, but they're also very respectful and very careful that they didn't try and embarrass me or anything like that. They were just really friendly, and we had just a lot of fun. I could understand barely a word anyone was saying, because even though. And this is another thing, again, like if you're learning Chinese, obviously you're watching this, you're either learning or you're thinking about learning. And, we always teach standard Mandarin, right? And Hebei is a province that has got the highest level of standard Mandarin speakers. This is Chengdu, and Chengdu Hua, like the Chengdu dialect, is really hard for me to understand. It's probably a bit easier than Sichuan Hua. But it was just, it was tough. And they were teaching me loads of cool, like, local words and stuff like that.
But I mean, so that people don't feel discouraged, I'm sure that if you spent like another week there around them all day, you'd get it. Because it's like, if you have the Mandarin foundation, you figure out the corresponding relationship between the pronunciations, and then very quickly.
I understood probably about 80%, but it was those 20% words, especially like the liu, like the locally only spoken local words.
Yeah.
I'd have the same problem probably if I went to Glasgow, right? But yeah, it was really interesting. They were just teaching me lots of words and stuff, and yeah, we drank all afternoon, slept for 3 hours, and then drank all night and ate, and just again jiaozi, dumplings, and of course that was all mixed in with loads more fireworks, and it was just I had a blast. And a common theme, and of course I went to see her foster parents as well, and we had a great time in Shijiazhuang. But a common theme was, you can't have the real Chunjie unless the Chunjie in the city is nowhere near the same experience. That's it. You've got to have it in like the countryside, the more sparse areas. So.
I can see that. It was 2 years ago, I think. I went to Hongkou, which is a sort of village just outside of Dujiangyan. And Dujiangyan is like a satellite city of Chengdu, right next to the mountains, and Qingchengshan, the birthplace of Taoism. Yeah. And this place was very I was there for the purpose of shooting a news show about the traditions of Chunjie in that area. But I don't know how authentic the experience was, because it was partially for the purpose of shooting this show. But I did go to a place where they made a huge meal, and there was 12 people sitting at the table, and we did a bunch of the traditions, and it was definitely different than anything I've experienced in the city. So I think that's probably right.
Yeah, it was just really, and the whole time it was just, even though of course I'm an outsider and having trouble understanding a lot of the time, it's like I just felt part of the family, and it was very warm. It was a very nice sort of atmosphere the entire time, and that might just be her family, but I'm pretty sure it's a common.
There's definitely a common thread of that culture. I was thinking about this the other day, that sometimes when it comes to a culture, like, China has always felt normal to me, because Chinese people in Sichuan anyway, they have a very similar culture to Philadelphians, where I'm from, in the sense that, I mean, not in all ways, but like in the way of Philadelphians aren't necessarily all that polite on the street or on the surface, or like if you're walking around, like if I'm just walking around, people might like look at me because I'm foreign, but generally speaking, people will keep to themselves. They're not going to like say hello, like that's Southern hospitality in America or something like that. But once you kind of break through the surface with somebody and get to know them a little bit, it's like they're suddenly incredibly polite and welcoming, and it's very. So I'm used to that. I've discovered that's kind of a weird commonality between Philadelphians and Chengdu people, but yeah.
So. I'm definitely up for doing that again next year.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's a genuine spring festival. I mean, I at least this time got to have a full meal from, a genuinely amazing cook. Xiao's mom was, she threw down in the kitchen. It was great. But she also had nothing else to talk about, like food. Even the Spring Festival Gala that was on, which is also quite a fun sort of thing to watch each year, just from the perspective it's a yearly tradition, and it's by far the most watched television event of the year of anything in the world, because China has so many people. Something like had over 1 billion viewers, which means that pretty much everyone was watching it. There's only 1.4 billion people here. So anyway, so I would make a comment about the gala. I'd be like, I think they've kind of improved the quality of the gala this year compared to last year. And she'd be like, yeah, so how's the food though? She just wouldn't change. There's no other topics. So like classic Chinese mom. Yeah. Love it. And and also I had a moment that I thought was sort of an interesting moment of me being a Westerner, thinking in my Western frame of mind when it comes to the Spring Festival Gala, because I was watching some of the performances, and my sort of estimation of the performances was, this isn't really all that amazing, and this is like a national show. It's like the big show that everybody's watching. I'm surprised they couldn't get a better like dancing troupe. And then of course that was me thinking in my like sort of Western frame of mind of like, of course if you're having a big media event, you're going to have the best of the best, right? But it turns out each show was a group of university students from a different province doing like their thing, and it was kind of like a hey, let's see how our young people are doing from the different provinces.
It's kind of like a Eurovision Song Contest sort of thing. It wasn't like the best of the best.
Yeah, it was more just like, hey, here's our university students doing some cool little, creative artistic things, and it's like, well, yeah, of course they're not going to be the best of the best then, but it's more like, and the Sichuan people came from Sichuan University, went on at one point, and it just made me change my frame of mind about it and realize that for Chinese people, this gala and like Chunjie and all of that, it's sort of a reflection on how's China doing, how are we doing as a community, as a civilization, as a culture. Because I think that I don't really think they think of themselves as a nation state. They think of themselves as a civilization. They're like, oh, we've been around here for a while, and it's a bit of a narrative, a bit of a story.
They don't think of themselves as necessarily China as a country. It's China as a culture. Like the country China has not been around for more than 70 years.
Yeah.
But the culture is definitely thousands of years old. Like, that's no mistaking that.
And it's so powerful that it survived the Cultural Revolution, which was in a way an attempt to like destroy a lot of it, but it still survived. So in a way, I have a lot of reverence for it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's awesome. Let's get to some questions from you guys.
We've got loads of. This is going to be a bit longer today, guys.
That's all right. But I mean, just as a reminder, everyone, when you're looking at our podcasts, we always do a good job of making sure that we timestamp everything. So, you never have to listen to the whole podcast. You can always look in the show notes and find a question that you find relevant to you and skip to it. That's totally cool. We do that in both the YouTube video and the podcast. So
yeah, and we'll follow this formula. So, excuse me. So we'll talk about what's going on. We'll give you some general updates. We'll maybe talk about a subject, and then we'll jump straight into the questions. And if you want to just listen to the beginning bit and then just skip everyone else and see if we mentioned you and go to that and then turn us off, you're welcome to do that as well. But
cool.
You'll still find a lot of useful stuff regardless.
All right. So let's see here. First,
Julian. Oh no, it was NASEEM.
Yeah, NASEEM again. He's the man. He's been doing asking so many good questions. All right. So what he says here is, could I take two props for the same character? So this is from character number 97, pai, which means like to, it has a couple meanings. The main one, though, the most common meaning is definitely to take a picture. So pai 照片, right? So that would be to take a picture. And so sometimes it can also mean like pai 肩膀, which means like just pat somebody, right? Yeah. And so this one, he says, sometimes my first prop, which represents the character, doesn't fit the scene. For example, the sun prop, which is, many of you know sun, just a little square with a line in the middle. Sometimes I imagine the sun, and sometimes I imagine my actor wearing yellow clothes which look like the sun. So this is an interesting question, I think. And so what I would say is my first reaction is that there is flexibility. For sure, especially if you're at character 97, you're already at a point where you understand how the method works. So if you want to change things around a little bit, that's okay. But just be very clear that you're doing it. And so, for example, we'll say have one prop per character component. If you're going to say I'm going to now have two props, be like, these are the two props. Like, it's not anything else. There's don't add a third, fourth. Like, just make it very clear in your mind that those are the extra props. But what I would say about this is if you wanted, you could, instead of making your actor, which is a representation of the pinyin pronunciation, wearing yellow, which is fine, you could just make your son grow arms and legs and walk around like a cartoon. That's also an option as well.
Yeah, I would say it's better to, in most cases, keep one prop, one component, one prop per component, but use your creativity a bit more as to how you can apply it to the thing you want. Maybe the thing you want to do just isn't going to work, and you should think about another way.
Right. Yeah, so
because at the end of the day, if you think of more props for the same component, it's just more opportunity to confuse yourself later when you try to recall the character. But I've done it. I did it when I first did this method. So
yeah, a lot of answers, it's like, here's our suggestion.
I don't want to be like, do what I do what I say, not what I do. You know.
Right.
So.
And also, he says, because sometimes my first prop, which represents the character, doesn't fit the scene. And I would say, well, maybe it doesn't fit the scene. Maybe you just didn't think of a way that it could fit the scene, though. It's like, sometimes it might seem like it doesn't fit at first, but if you did it the next day with a different frame of mind, it would fit the scene perfectly.
So, yeah. So I would say, overall, do it, but try not to do it too much and make it clear. And you just add on the end of that question, about the future. Are you interested in making videos about life in China, the habits people have, how things go in China? Yes.
Yeah.
One channel I've followed since before I came to China for like 7 years is Serpent ZA. I'm a huge fan of his channel. I think he's doing great. And AVD China, I believe.
Yeah, that's their thing where they're like traveling
sort of work together
around.
a lot. I'm sorry, I can't remember the guy's name there, but
I know he goes by LAWY86, but I don't remember his actual name.
Yeah.
But
So I love that, and I would love to do something similar where we do explore Chinese culture and the life in China, but whilst teaching a bit of Chinese as well. But we've got so much stuff in the pipeline that might not be able
I
to
talked
get
about
around
this a
to
bit
it
last
anytime
week.
soon.
We're going to do it at some point. It's just a question of time and energy, because it is it's a big project, and like that's all those guys do, right? Like they don't teach a Chinese course, so it's like fitting it in is a bit tough. But as I mentioned last week, if any of you are interested in a podcast format where we bring in maybe Yo Lao Shi or Annie and we have a little bit of a discussion in Chinese, if any of you are interested in that that's a little bit easier for us to pull off, so we can maybe do that as well. All right, cool.
Okay, Julian LAFFEY, just a quick one. In order to remember 己, meaning 自己 as in self, that character, the sort of image that he used to represent the keyword connection, the meaning of the character essentially was to take a selfie. So you had his actor taking a selfie in the so maybe a mobile phone is not, or a cell phone is not a prop in that. But
or
that's
maybe even a selfie stick or something.
Yeah, but that's an example of where you can bring in foreign objects, like objects that aren't related to anything else, but they're related to the keyword in order to represent the meaning.
Yeah,
that's
it's directly related to the meaning. It's perfect. And, again, like everything like this, you can always take it even a step further, which is, we're talking about taking a selfie, especially with a selfie stick, because they really stand out. I watched a Stuart Lee comedy special called Content Provider, and he ends it with a big like selfie stick moment, which is really funny. And so, you can just even take it another level anytime. So you go selfie stick. Oh, do I have any particular associations with that? In this case, I happen to. But it's probably good enough as it is, but you can always make it deeper.
Yeah. Although I'm aware, Sydney Green is next.
This is character 139, CHUŌ. It's a casting call.
CHUŌ as in to go.
Yeah.
And he is for QU. We recommend that these 6 different pronunciations. That's 5, 6. We represent using either God or a world leader. This is just simply to visually make it distinct from the other 3 categories of male, female, and fictional character. But he went for, as a Brit, he's going to choose the Queen. So that's great. She's kind of a world leader, isn't she, at least?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that she falls into that category. And of course, the Queen doesn't sound like CHUŌ, but it's spelled the same. The first 2 letters are the same. So that's fine. I always like to do with CHUŌ. I always like to imagine Trump, because it's just, he's like, love him or hate him, he's a pretty memorable character. I just imagine him. He's in the kitchen of my childhood home, and he's banning all spoons from this, whatever, from entering the sink. Anyway, next.
Right. So Chad, SHUŌ, actress who had roles in movies such as The Transporter and The Legend of the Fist. I know that woman. That's for qi. That's again for that QI, which is a female. Anything with an I is a E sound is female.
So he's picking a person to represent every time in the future that QI will be used. And so if you happen to already know a bit about Chinese culture or have watched some Chinese movies and you know somebody with the name Qi, perfect, right? That's great.
Or if you just think she's hot.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And sometimes, obviously if you haven't gotten into any of that, it won't work, but don't shy away from that idea of using an actual Chinese actor.
Yeah. So next one is YARDEN, so for the character MIÀN, as in noodles, or, well, it can mean about 1 million different things, but we represented the 2 components as Bai, meaning 100, and Mo, meaning I. Now, he is actually recommended something which I believe works better, but it has 3 props as opposed to 2. So I think we actually considered this originally when we did it like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But then I think we dropped it for something with just 2 components to make it easier. But he's recommended a knife, as in just a straight line, a box, as in mouth, and nose, which is the Z character. And I actually think that works better logically, but it's just one extra prop. So it's sort of 6 of one and half a dozen of the other for me. So yeah, we're always open to suggestions like that, guys. And
well, it's okay. Like there's not everything that we like. I mean, even the if you were to learn the character 3, San, you could make that 3 props of, because it's just 3 horizontal lines, right? So we often recommend a cigar for representing that single horizontal line. You could make that 3 cigars, or you could make it 1 cigar and then have the second bit be twins, because that represents R, the 2 horizontal lines. So even on that level, there's some flexibility in what you can choose. I like this. I think it's
it actually makes, like I said, because to be fair, it has got an extra line in there, right? So it's sort of it does it, you know, but
it's one of those things where, you know,
like you say, it's close enough.
It's close enough, but one of the things that you should remember, Yarden, when you're doing this is that your brain is not going to have that big of a problem with that idea of like, oh, in Bai, it's got that horizontal line in the center, and Mian doesn't have the horizontal line going across the whole way. How am I going to remember? It's like, no, you'll be fine, because you're going to keep doing your Anki card, then you're going to see it in words. Then you're going to see it in sentences. Like, it's not going to be an issue in the long run. And it's hard to see that when you're at the beginning, but you're not going to have a problem if you just did the suggestion that we made. So either one, really. Either one's okay.
You want to handle this one from Ryan?
Sure. We got Ryan Smith. I put this in here because I just really appreciate this type of help. So we use Anki as our background smart spaced repetition flashcard system, and you know it's good and bad. It's amazing. It allows you to remember everything, but it's not a very user-friendly interface. So luckily though, Ryan has been using Anki for years. He says, I've been using Anki for over a decade at this point, so I have quite a bit of prior experience with it already. My largest interval right now is 18.5 years, which I think amounts to I never see this card again, which is very true. So this has allowed me to feel quite comfortable in making some small changes to the Anki cards and process that I thought I might share with you. Now, he actually gave us a few new suggestions, and we actually made a change to the images with some code that he gave us. So now your images will never be too big for your card, which is nice. That was a great little addition, and they're already in the new Anki card downloads. But this one I wanted to put in because it might be useful to any of you on the course right now. So when you're adding a new card, so like when you're going through your daily videos and you're learning new characters and components and actors and sets and all of that, we suggest that you do a custom study where you add as many cards as the videos you did times 2, since there's 2 cards. But sometimes the math doesn't add up and it doesn't work very well for people, so there's an alternate way of doing this. And so here's what Ryan says. Rather than setting the new card limit to 0 and manually doing a custom study to add the new cards, I go in and suspend all the cards when I import the new decks. Now, suspend is a feature in Anki, and you can do this in Browse by hitting Command J, or you can actually just, if in Anki 2.1, you can right click and hit suspend. In Anki 2.0, there's a little suspend button on the top of Browse. Okay, so going back. So after he suspends all the cards, then having a search limiting to the Mandarin Blueprint deck along with the tag is : suspended in the top search bar. I manually unsuspend them when I get to the point in the course, and this has the nice benefit of putting me in the card editor while unsuspending them to add my images and custom text. So this allows him, while he's going through the course, to just quickly unsuspend the card, put it into his queue, and if he wants to make any edits, wants to add an image for a vocab card or anything like that, he can just do that. And I would recommend that if any of you are not doing the lessons with Anki open at the same time, I would recommend that you do that, because that will just allow you quickly in the moment, unsuspend the card, add an image, whatever you want to do. If you want to add a note of just something you thought of, do it on the spot, because you're unlikely to do it later if you don't do it on the spot. So I love that stuff. Yeah, and just thank you, Ryan, because that type of stuff is, it's like so cool that you put something out in the internet and then somebody out there just says, here's a big improvement you can make. So it's great.
Yeah. Another one from NASEEM. Hello, Luke and Phil. There are lots of HSK1 hearing training apps in which you hear the pinyin and you should guess the initial or tones. When I use these apps, I have to hide the character because when I see the character, boom, he uses the word boom for like a click going off.
Yeah.
That was in my friend's backyard or kitchen. Actually, I remember the full scene with all the small details, so I hide the character to use these apps. I guess he means that it's because it's like distracting.
Well, it's like a cheat. It's like he feels like he's cheating, right? Because
I
have to guess the opinion, but I don't have to guess the opinion because I look at the character and I already know it, right?
And that's the beauty of this method is that everything's so deeply connected. Even if you forget a character for temporarily or what have you, you just remember one detail of it, where it's the initial, the final, the actor. The props or something, it will more often than not trigger the entire thing, and any other actors that are in that particular room as well, relate to other characters, and that's the beauty of creating such deep and varied connections to one piece of information.
Yeah,
lots of roots to it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the key to remembering stuff. All right, the next question is from Keith Wilkins. This is for character number 22, XIŌNG, as in older brother. And he asks, is this more commonly used than ge ge? He actually wrote ge ge with the two first tones, but it's ge ge, first tone, fifth tone. So is this XIŌNG more commonly used than ge ge for older brother? And it's actually not really used at all as a single word for older brother.
Yeah, you can't use it alone.
Ge ge is, you can't use it alone. You can't go, hey, XIŌNG, or XIŌNG XIŌNG. You can't say XIŌNG XIŌNG. They have Didi, you have Jie, you have Mei Mei, but you don't have XIŌNG XIŌNG. Ge ge for some reason is different.
Yeah, so you can think of it as just a general use word for brotherhood or brothers. If you're going to refer to, you could even say XIŌNG MEI to mean an older brother and a younger sister. But you can't, for whatever reason, you don't say ge mei or ge di to refer to an older brother and a younger brother, an older brother and a younger sister. So when you're talking about brotherhood in general or brothers and sisters or whatever, you will use XIŌNG. So XIŌNG di jie mei, right? And it is an exception because the other ones you can say, you could say jie di to mean an older sister and a younger brother. You could say jie mei, older sister, younger sister. For some reason, they don't use ge in those particular words, but that's the difference. So ge ge. Now, there is something to point out about ge ge, which is that Chinese people often use this when they don't mean their literal, like, nuclear family older brother. They do use it for that, but sometimes it's like my older cousin, or sometimes it's a woman towards an older man who's in her general age group, who's in her same generation. She'll refer to that. I'd never hear guys say that, really, but that's another point about ge ge, is that the way they use sort of family words sometimes will apply to people who aren't quite family. Kind of like, when I was a kid, I had an Uncle Ralph and an Uncle Charlie, who were just my dad's friends.
Exactly. Yep, I had the same thing.
So it's sort of similar.
The next one's from Chad RESSLER, character 25, Ji, as in plan, and it's a make a movie lesson.
So this is a scene sharing.
Yeah. So the location is the backyard. Again, it's fourth tone, Ji, so that's going to be represented by the backyard of the childhood home. That's the location. Actor is Janice, his stepmom, and the props are a megaphone representing the left component, speech component, and cross, as in like a crucifix, representing the crucifix shape of SHUŌ 10. So I'm standing in my childhood home backyard where I see an abnormally large cross and my stepmom Janice standing in front of it looking distraught. All she keeps doing is yelling into a megaphone at this huge cross, "What is your plan for my life?"
Oh, I love it.
What is your plan for my life? Now, that is purely audio based. As far as I can see, which I usually recommend adding some sort of visual component to represent plan. But maybe you obviously, well, not maybe, obviously your stepmom better than we know her, so maybe that's something that she would say.
Well, that's also a cultural trope, right? Because in Christianity, it's like, I can't see God's plan, or what's God's plan for me, and she's looking at a cross.
Oh,
and so
do you know what? Yeah, completely spaced on that.
That's what I saw when she was doing that.
I didn't see that at all. Maybe that could be part of it. Like, give me a plan for life. Yeah. But even so, the connection may still be too subtle if it's purely audio. But this is one of my things, because we taught this for a long time, for many hundreds of hours to hundreds of people, and we picked up a few things where people often things that people do that often lead to mistakes or poor recall. So
just
something to consider.
Here's
maybe
a simple thing you could do to make it a little bit, because this does strike me as probably emotionally powerful enough because
I reckon it'd be fine, but as a general guideline.
Here's a simple way to kind of have a funny little twist at the end that would make it simpler is, if it's a crucifix, like some crosses don't have Jesus on it, but if it's a crucifix, you can imagine Jesus like suddenly he pulls his hands out and he takes out a day planner and he's just like, here, that's your plan. That'd be kind of funny to add that at the end. Simple stuff there. So,
or you are using the megaphone to shout at your stepmom, and she's drawing a plan or putting up a plan on the crucifix.
Sure.
There's all sorts of ways you can do it. Just something visual. I usually recommend but yeah, overall, I'm sure that'd be absolutely fine. We always just like to give general guidelines. We never like to be dogmatic about any of this stuff.
Yeah, and the emotional memory of it is possibly because the memory champions, like the guys who are really really good at mnemonic visualization, will say it's far more important to get the emotion right of the scene than necessarily the visual. Obviously our visual cortex is 50% of our brain, so having the visual side of it is very important. But if you can manage to create some kind of feeling within the memory that is strong for you, like a moment where she's unclear on her path in life and she's like, I'm desperate, I'm going to pray to God, and I'm so desperate I'm using a megaphone to shout, what's your plan?
Absolutely. So that's true, but also another thing to mention is, again, this is straight out of Dominic O'Brien, 8-time world champion, memory athlete, memory champion. He always used to say that, and still does say that, using emotion is more of it's a bit more advanced. You want to try and do it as much as you can, but beginners, novices at this sort of thing usually rely more on exaggerated visuals, exaggerated audio, whatever it may be.
Sure.
But so just we'll see. It's a balancing act.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So next one is from James Kai. An email we got from him. Hi guys, I've married a Chinese girl 3 years ago and promised myself that I will communicate fluently with her family within 5 years' time. Steady on, man. You can do it much quicker than that. I'm currently visiting her parents with her, and I understand a fair bit because my wife speaks to me in Mandarin quite often. But time is ticking, and I'm not speaking as much as I would like to. Can you please let me know if a year's period, I see, a year's period would be enough with your blueprint to learn conversational fluent Mandarin? I would really love to impress my in-laws in 2020 and have a good conversation with them when they visit us in April next year in Australia. Well, I actually already answered James on this one. I'm just remembering now. What I said to him was roughly, yes. The short answer is yes, but it's not necessarily about the time in years or months. It's more about how many hours you put in and, of course, what you focus on. So if you want to be conversationally fluent, as in you can speak relatively fluently, and to be conversationally fluent, you need to have a grasp of at least a few hundred important common words. I'd say the full 1,000 would be fine. Like our course, as it stands, we will be expanding it very soon, but as it stands, it is 80%. It covers the most common 1,000 words, 600 characters.
Yeah. Which will cover a lot of context, but just not everything. It's like you'll be able to handle things like just simple conversations. How do you get to this place? Where should what should I order? How can I have a conversation about your interests and hobbies and things of that nature? And then if it gets a little bit more complicated, you get into like, I don't know, geopolitics or something, you're going to get lost. But like then you
get lost anyway. Yeah. But yeah, it's enough to be conversationally fluent, and you'll need to pick up a few nouns and stuff like objects that you won't know, but you'll be able to work your way around most problems. But within a year, you have to do a lot of, if you want to be speaking conversation. I mean, we can definitely guarantee within a year, if you put enough hours in, that you can read and understand all that. But in order to speak effectively, you need to output. You need to do a lot of outputting practice, right? And that's up to you. We usually recommend don't rush into speaking. At least don't force yourself into speaking. Get a grasp of reading and listening first, because you can't produce what you don't have in here, right? That's sort of one of our key principles, right?
Absolutely.
So I would say, but for you, if you feel like you're in a bit of a rush, you want to get really good really quickly. Okay, in that case, I would recommend starting off with, say, something like a tutor Mandarin or italki, something like that. get at least a couple of speaking sessions going a week. It doesn't have to be like loads, at least not starting out, but still focus very heavily on listening and reading, working your way through the blueprint, the Mandarin Blueprint Method, learning all those characters that you need to learn, all the words, reading the sentences, and reviewing those. That was one of the key things I said in the email, which is be sure to review your flashcards. It's absolutely vital when you're starting out. And and just in your speaking sessions, well, we have a whole, we have in the ebook that we made, you can download from our website, from the resources section, we talk about, I believe I can't remember exactly which chapter, it's towards the end, we talk about how to actually use a tutor effectively. And so we usually recommend, just chat, just chat, but have a paid tutor is usually more effective. Yeah. Have he or she write down notes and let you speak, right?
And most importantly, you need to find somebody who you feel relaxed around. If your teacher, like I had a couple of, I used to do weekly tutoring sessions that were free if you gave them a little evaluation at the end. But it was one place I did it had the same tutor each week, which was great. But then one place I did it was a different tutor each week. And it was so funny how the difference, like sometimes you would get along great with a tutor and sometimes you'd be like, I can't believe that this is so boring and frustrating, so you need to have a rapport with the teacher for sure so that you can be relaxed, because if you're not relaxed, you're going to struggle. Like if you're stressed or you're like, oh, this person's weird, then you're going to be more self-conscious and that's going to hurt your language ability. So, I just add one more thing to this, which is that, reading does help speaking. It doesn't seem like it would, right? Yeah. But when you're trying to speak, part of the process is finding the word that you want to say, right? And that process has a lag time when you're first starting to learn a language, because you have to you haven't seen enough context yet.
Even if you're an advanced learner like us, we still have that issue if we're discussing a topic or trying to find vocabulary that's more advanced, right? So like it's a bit rarer. We haven't used before. Constantly I'd have the same problem with English, right? If I was trying to discuss something about that I'm not too familiar with, right?
Yeah. And so what reading does is it diminishes that lag time of finding the word, which is relevant to speaking. Now, you have to keep practicing pronunciation, because what can happen, and this will happen to everybody as they go through this process, is the word, but you just shoot and miss because you haven't practiced it enough from a muscular standpoint in your mouth. So you go to say the word and you go, this didn't come out right. But just everybody understand that reading can help you speak. It seems like they're unrelated, but they totally are.
Well, what you should do is make it more efficient. So read and listen at the same time. And if you can, also read, listen, and speak. We call this shadowing. Read, listen, and speak at the same time. So that is most bang for your buck of any exercise. Again, we talk about that in the pronunciation mastery towards the end, in the final chapter, in the final unit. Yeah. So
it's very brain intensive to do that, but it is great. It's really good for your pronunciation.
But I like to listen and read daily to like a Chinese article or something, and it helps. It does wonders. So the next one we have is from Jim AWOFADEJU. Jim, you got to tell us if we're saying your name wrong, because we're going to keep saying it like that. Character 5, Gan casting call. Casting call is where we choose an actor based on the initial spelling or sound, the G. He chose Gary Coleman as his actor. He remembers Gary Coleman. He says, I remember Gary Coleman from watching a funny episode of Drake and Josh when I was a teenager. And Drake and Josh was a sitcom that aired in the United States on Nickelodeon channel. And the episode was funny because Drake and Josh got in trouble for it. So this is very specific. I like that. Drake and Josh got in trouble for selling Gary Coleman grills. Okay. So, yeah, the more personal, more emotionally involved you are with the actor, the better. And we mentioned that a lot. So if you haven't already heard that from us, that's something to remember.
Next question comes from Sydney Green as he finished level 13. And he said, great to reach the end of level 13. I have to say that I have found it quite different without the videos. Now, what he's referring to is that at level level 12 is the last level that has videos for each individual lesson. And at that point, you've seen 300 some videos. So we're going to let you go and do it on your own because you understand the technique. So
of course, we still have all the written material there.
Yeah, of course.
But we just don't talk you through the whole thing.
There's no need.
We didn't want to start getting annoying.
Yeah,
just
right.
keep mentioning the same point over and over again.
Yeah. So anyway, so he says, right, I have to say I find it quite different without the videos. Not difficult, different. Although I appreciate the speed with which I am able to deal with each character. Exactly. I just hope that the movies created are vivid enough to stay in my memory. I'm going really well keeping up with Anki. Overall, I'm loving it, and I feel I'm getting somewhere. I feel I'm getting somewhere. It's a real thrill to be able to read and speak the sentences without pinyin, and it's like,
that's exactly what we designed it for. We spent so long organizing the words and introducing the sentences at the right time to get that sort of feeling. I can read, and I've only learned 100 characters, and I can read Chinese sentences without the help of pinyin. That's awesome.
And he hasn't been on the course that long, so it didn't take him that long to get to this point.
He's done really well, well. And I would just like to mention about Anki. Yes, we don't just say do Anki because it helps you remember. It also points out where things are going wrong. So he's saying, I hope that these scenes are vivid enough to stay in my memory. Well, if you test yourself on Anki and you test yourself properly without cheating or anything, then you're going to know exactly when you try and recall your scene, your actors, your props, you're going to know where the problems are because you're not going to be able to remember how to write the components. You're not going to be able to remember or you're going to write the whole character and have no problem, but you won't know what it means. Exactly. So that's why Anki is also beautiful because it points out that instantly.
It's perfect because what it does is it just like there's nothing that could possibly happen that Anki won't tell you exactly what it is, like you said, and that because there's two types of cards. So the one type of card shows the character on the front, and you have to come up with the pronunciation and the meaning. Well, that's the card that's going to tell you if you forgot your actor or set or room in the set. And also, the way they interacted, right? And the other card is the keyword on the front with the pinyin, and that's the one where you're going to realize if you forgot a prop or if you forgot the meaning. So it's there's no way you're not going to know exactly what's missing, and why it's better than rote learning is that with rote learning, if you forgot one, start over. That's all you can do. But with this, it's like, oh no, slightly edit.
Yeah, go back into your scene or do a reshoot. We could call it a reshoot, couldn't we?
Yeah. We're going to take that one again, right? that's all it is. And it's like, So
also, that's also another reason. Please don't think you have to make your scenes perfect. I think we say this about 1 million times in the course. I don't want to keep repeating ourselves, but don't think you have to make the scenes perfect in your head. Don't be the architect from the Matrix, okay? Yeah. Just do it, what you get from A to B, make sure you think it's going to work, boom, next character. Anki will tell you if you've got a problem.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, so next one is from KAI-MING CHEAH. Again, please tell us if we're saying that wrong. Character 24, SHUŌ, as in to speak. That's to make a movie, again, learning the character itself.
So he points out a script a sample script that we wrote, and he was a little bit confused about it. So the script is, speaking is an easy one to visualize. Shrek has got a megaphone and is speaking so much that you are finding it very hard to take. You take a big wad of cash and stuff it into his megaphone to shut him up. And he said, where is the devil component in this example? And so the right side component of SHUŌ appears like a guy with horns. Yeah. And so that's why you could have it be the devil. However, that character by itself, dui, means to exchange. And one of the options we gave was a money exchange when you're in, a currency exchange or something. And so you have a big wad of a new foreign currency or something like that. So that was an alternate component. And it's a good example because the devil one is based on how the actual component looks. And then the wad of cash is based on what the original character meant. So that's why the devil component wasn't there. The wad of cash was the representation.
Right. So next one's from NASEEM again. He's got a story for PÉNG, as in 朋友, which is two moon props or components next to each other. Peter is his actor, P. Location is friend Stefan's house. He has a lots of emotions involved in that place, which is awesome. So two moons, that's his two props representing the two yue characters or components in this case. Peter was in the kitchen training with the kettlebells. The moons look like kettlebells. Oh, nice. So he sort of got two moons, like training like that. He was training, shrugs. He was doing shrugs. The weight was very heavy. The motivation coach, Ronnie Coleman, comes out and shouts, Yeah, buddy. Lightweight buddy. Again, the key word we gave this was buddy, as in friend. Ronnie is famous for his speech. Ronnie Coleman. I know that name. I can't quite picture him in my head, though. But that's another example, I believe, of bringing in a foreign object or a person or whatever it is that is not related to the character itself in the way it looks, but it's related to the meaning. So that's okay. Like Mr. Motivator. I may have brought in Mr. Motivator. Come on, you know. And
he like literally says that. That's his catchphrase.
That's his catchphrase. So that works very, very well. This movie is a bit long, but in my mind it's just 3D. This is quick. This is often what we say as well. When we try and explain this method or some of our scenes to people, they're like, that sounds like a lot of effort. But it's like, it took me about a minute to explain it, but it takes seconds in your head, you know?
Right,
so that's a good point there.
So he asked, how is my movie? Great. I can't see any problems with it because I liked it made me laugh because it was like moon kettlebells. Like talking about lifting the moon. It's like, man, he's got some strong shoulders with that. And then, of course, that connection to that particular guy. Like, I've never heard of that guy before, but because you have NASEEM, it works.
Yes,
so that's great stuff.
Yeah, it seems to have got the method down there. Another one from so this is from Jim for character number 11, SHÉN, as in what, SHÉN. He chose Shaquille O'Neal. Shaquille is widely known as a professional basketball player, but he did star in movies.
That's true.
I've watched many of his, and he's hilarious. I've seen him. He's just. I've watched many of his movies. He appeared in Good Burger. And he's a TV personality now within the NBA. I like the segment Shaq a fool. Oh, Shaq. I get it. All right, fine. Shaq certainly brings in humor, of course, and he's just very memorable in general. So that's very personal for Jim.
I love Shaq.
Yeah, everyone loves Shaq.
And he's huge. He's such a huge person. So like if he were in the room, so here's an example of how you can use Shaq to like make your scenes better. Is that you don't have to use this technique every time you do a scene, but a way to make your scenes more exciting is try to imagine how the room would actually react if Shaq was there. So like for example, if one of your sets is your high school and Shaq is in your high school, like just imagine like the other students in the high school, Shaq, what are you doing here? You know, like it's so good. It makes it kind of silly and absurd.
That's right. So, this is another really quick one from Ryan. Again, it's character 63, but in this case, D, as in mu di. So it's a 多音字. It's got more than one pronunciation, which 20% or so of common characters have. So we chose that so it could have a tone. And it could be in one of the known rooms, basically, a common room. So he already picked a target as a prop for 中, meaning middle. So he already picked like an actual bullseye target or a dartboard sort of thing. And he couldn't figure out what to use for this character, because this character is also also make the movie. So what to do to represent the meaning of D in this particular case, because D actually means bullseye.
Sure.
In that pronunciation. So he used Bullseye, the character from that awful Daredevil movie.
Yeah,
and he actually did say terrible Daredevil movie. It is
right.
bad.
And Colin Farrell played this guy in the terrible Daredevil movie.
He's very, very memorable in that.
Yeah. So sometimes terrible art is really memorable. That's why everybody remembers The Room so well. And they made a whole movie just about how bad it was.
Ben Affleck, he keeps trying, doesn't he?
All right, next question from NASEEM at character 105, Lai at the Make a Movie lesson. And I know why he left this here, because this is the first time that we do not give a video with one of the lessons. So we mentioned that earlier in the podcast. He said, there's no play button on this video. Is this a system problem or am I on my own now? And I read this and I was like, oh no, NASEEM thinks we've abandoned him. No, you're completely capable of learning a character by now. Because again, you've seen over 300 videos at this point, NASEEM. So you got it. You understand the principles of how this works. And the fact that you don't have to watch a video now is good news, right? Because that means that you can smash through it really quickly and start getting to the point where you can learn, 20 characters in a sitting maybe, or maybe even 30. You'll start to see your potential really blossom at this point, because there's nothing about the system that you don't get. Now, of course, if you have any questions going forward, just leave a comment. If something's unclear, if you don't think a prop makes sense, or you don't understand how you can come up with a scene for something, always let us know. We'll address it on the podcast, and maybe we'll even put that clip on that particular character to help other people. But you got it, man. So be confident. You got it.
Same goes for anyone else that's reached the 105, the character number 105. You know, you got the skills there, and if you forget anything, you can always ask us or rewatch a video from. You've got access to them forever. So so we've got one more question here from Jim. I don't know whether or not you talked about what life is like where you live in Chengdu. What is the cost of living like? How would you rate the cost of food, transportation? I've never been to China before, but I'm certain that if you guys, Luke and Phil, have been to many different cities in China. If I was interested in moving to China in the future to live and or work, would Chengdu be a great city? Please consider talking about life in Chengdu or other Chinese cities in a podcast episode.
Yeah, I was very happy to end today's podcast with this series of questions because, I love Chengdu. So, like, it's it's a fun...
Chengdu's great. You've been here for 5 years?
I've been in Chengdu for 5 years. I lived in Beijing and Chongqing as well. So I have a little bit of a comparison of what it's like to live in other cities. And I've been to, loads of cities. But although I haven't been to Guangzhou yet, which is kind of interesting.
Don't worry about it. Not missing much. So
first question here was
we want to talk about, we should make that an episode soon, shouldn't we? About Chengdu, just what it's like to live in Chengdu, the good.
Yeah, we could go into more detail, but just to answer like some of Jim's like simple questions, was the cost of living life? Well, it's pretty good. It's pretty low.
That depends on you. For me, I've just started to get better at money, but I'm generally very, very bad and just like very impulsive. But it all depends on your spending habits. But you can live incredibly cheaply. Most people's wages are 3,000 renminbi a month, 300 pounds or whatever, and that's including rent and stuff, and they still save very, very well. I know people, it all depends on what you want your living situation to be like, but it's very affordable. But
and your average foreigner coming over here to learn to teach English is going to make more than 3,000.
You're going to make let's just say, because that's the most common job, is you're going to be an English teacher. After tax, you're going to make 10,000 RMB, which is about 1,000. I can just do it in pounds, and £1,000 or so, which doesn't sound that much, I guess, but you can live on £6 a day, £5 a day, and eat well.
And you got you asked about transportation. Subway is anywhere from 2 RMB to like the most I think is 6 RMB if you're going from like one end of the system to the other.
And there's like motorbikes everywhere, cheap DDs or Ubers.
So we're talking about $1 at the most expensive for subways, and the subway system is expanding quite a lot. Like just near my house, there's 2 lines that are going to open up at the end of this year and mid next year. And
taxes are very low.
Yeah.
You don't make too much.
You can order if you order the equivalent of Uber, like you said, the DD. It's not
a few dollars.
Too expensive, and it's great. And also Chengdu is building this greenway, which is I just was reading about it the other day. It's going to be the largest sort of urban greenway in the world in terms of like area that is considered park in Chengdu, because they've decided that Chengdu is going to be the park city. I looked at the plan and I was like, this is great. And some of it's completed construction, and I'm a runner, so I'll run along this, and it's so pleasant. It's really, really nice, and it's like everybody's chilling out. I love Chinese old people walking around, senior citizens here. They're dancing. They're like, having, they're doing the tuo luo, which is a fun little game that they do with a top. Basically, it's kind of like a top on the ground. And it's just charming. And so I would say that the fact they're building that out, it's a great place to live. It's easy to get around. And so that's food and transportation. And I think that
we could literally. I think we should do.
We could probably devote a whole episode.
Yeah, I think we should. Maybe either next episode or in the coming few episodes, we will probably just talk about general Chengdu life and life in China and how it compares to the West for the average person. I think that's a great idea. But we've already gone probably. But it's already a very long podcast, so we should probably try and.
Yeah, sure.
But yes, in short, Chengdu great. Come to Chengdu. It's probably the most livable city, and not just being biased, right?
Well, there are some surveys even that seemed. It's hard to do happiness surveys because it's based on self-reporting to some degree, but it's not nothing. And Chengdu has consistently been rated the happiest city of the major cities, and so that's one thing. And of course, it goes without saying that the food is excellent.
Food's amazing. The weather is really nice in the summer and autumn and spring. Terrible winters, but
And it's terrible because it's gray, not because it's all that cold. Anybody who's who's from like Canada or any very northern place is like, this is not cold, but it's a little bit gray and dreary in the winter.
And the most beautiful women of all China, most likely. I mean,
I might have to give the nod to Chongqing on that one.
Chongqing,
but
they're
close.
But it's historically provable as well, But we'll talk about that maybe in another episode. So thank you very much, everyone, for this week's questions. Do you have anything else you want to add?
That's all for this week. As always, if you want to join the course, if you haven't joined already, the link is in the show notes, mandarinblueprint.com. You can see our new blog posts. And we also have a weekly digest email where we send you all the most recent blog posts, podcast episodes, YouTube videos. We're always coming out with new stuff. So if you want to subscribe to that, you can do that on our website. And just thank you, everyone, for all the questions. It's never lost on us that you don't have to leave any comments. You could just take the value from the course and move on to the fact that you leave comments for us to talk about. We're very grateful. So thanks very much.
So keep them coming, and see you next week.
See ya.